Now that Lindsey Graham and Bill Cassidy have proposed their replacement for the Affordable Care Act, there are a number of senators who have said that they will support the legislation. However, through interviews, it's become quite clear that they themselves have no idea what's in this legislation. So let's give you the first example. Here is MSNBC's Katy Tur talking to Senator Barrasso.
Can you assure people of Wyoming that they're not going to lose their health care because of a pre-existing condition?
Those are two entirely different things. This bill protects everyone with a pre-existing condition. I believe people with pre-existing conditions need to be covered for those conditions. As a doctor and a husband of a wife who's had breast cancer.
Senator, I just want to know one thing. Can you guarantee the people of Wyoming that the costs associated with their pre-existing conditions will not go up so much so that they will not be able to afford it?
The costs have gone up already under Obamacare, Katie, so much that people can't afford it.
I'm not talking about Obamacare. I'm asking this for Graham-Cassidy, which is something that you're going to be voting for. So I'm just asking you,
more money is going to come into Wyoming as a result of Graham-Cassidy selling insurance in Wyoming.
I'm just trying to get you to answer the question that I asked, which is, can you guarantee the people of Wyoming? Let me finish my question, and then you can answer it. I'm not talking about Obamacare. I'm talking about Graham-Cassidy.
Well, you should, because it's failed.
Respectfully, this is the bill that you are voting for. This is the bill that your constituents, the people of Wyoming and the people of America, will use for their health care if they don't get it through their employer. So can you tell?
Better off.
Let me finish. Can you tell your voters, the people of Wyoming, that the costs associated with their pre-existing condition will not go up so much that they will not be able to afford health care coverage?
People can't afford it now, Katie.
That's
I don't understand what you don't understand.
Senator.
You're being hammered with huge costs, and it's all a result of Obamacare, which is why Donald Trump got 70% of the vote in Wyoming. People were absolutely fed up with what the Democrats have done across the country.
Thank you for answering, I guess, about Obamacare. Again, I was asking about Graham-Cassidy.
All right, so that was Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming. And if you are not irritated, in the very least, by that exchange, you should be, because his go-to is to deflect and attack the Affordable Care Act. Well, you are supporting legislation, so please explain to me, what is it about this legislation that you think is going to be beneficial to the American people? He can't even answer that question.
And I'm also guessing that, and this is just off the top of my head, that Donald Trump did worse at 70% as the Republican candidate than any Republican candidate in the past 50 years in Wyoming. So the 70%, that's why he got 70% in this state. He got 70% in this state because look at their senator. Look at John Barrasso. I mean, they are a backward state. They're the state that gave us Dick Cheney. This is the way they think in that way. And I've been to that state. I love that state. I've met great people in that state. But that has nothing to do with this argument. And honestly, this is not about the Affordable Care Act. He could say that she could have. I thought Katy Tur did a great job there, but he could have said, yeah, it's about but answer the question. Graham-Cassidy does not do what he says is going to do.
Right, exactly. And I think lawmakers like Barrasso have been able to do exactly what he did in that segment and get away with it because there hasn't been enough emphasis on policy. I mean, during our past election, I feel like there wasn't enough discussion on policy. There was a lot of random drama and gossip and the fighting and the cat fights. But all of a sudden America is awake and they're concerned about the fact that their health care is on the line. And so he's not gonna get away with answers like that. You can't just attack the Affordable Care Act and then refuse to answer a single question about the proposal that you are supporting. What do you like about it? How is it gonna impact Americans in a positive way? If you can't answer that question, that says something.
And he's part of McConnell's leadership team, so it's not surprising that he is not delving into what the nuts and bolts of any legislation is. It just doesn't surprise me at all.
Exactly, and by the way, I mean, if I were supporting legislation and I truly believed that it was going to benefit my constituents, I couldn't wait to talk about it, right? And I would go on that show and I would detail specific portions of it that will help lower premiums, but he's unable to do that. Well, he's not the only one. Vox did this great piece where they spoke to 9 senators about the replacement plan for the Affordable Care Act. And Jeff Stein is the writer for Vox who did these interviews and had these incredible exchanges. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of them, but I did pick a few that I particularly enjoyed and wanted to share with you. So in one exchange with Ted Cruz, Jeff Stein says, let's go to graphic 27A. You really believe that cutting federal spending by 34% will not result in any other people losing their insurance? Ted Cruz's response was, what federal spending is cut? You should know. Stein continues to say, well, the Medicaid expansion would be sunset for one, is my understanding. And Cruz says, the decrease in future rates of growth is not a cut, and it is only in the bizarre world of Washington that billions more money is characterized in the press as a cut rather than an increase, which is in fact what it is. I mean, you want to take that?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ted Cruz is really great at doing what he does. He is a master of flipping this stuff around. And it may, he's a states' rights guy. This is about giving the healthcare back to the states. And his state right now is just getting pounded because of their hurricane rebuilding. And so much of their, of the revenue in that state, so much of the tax revenue, business tax revenue comes from the Chemical Coast that just got decimated by those floods and had to shut down all of that. So the fact that he's asking for federal money to fix that and saying that no, we're not going to take federal money for healthcare is at once the most hypocritical thing I've ever heard, because he is philosophically against this. Every single time he stepped out onto the platform when he was running for president, the first thing he's going to do is repeal and replace, which is fine. I mean, there were people that were against that, and he's allowed to be against that. But what he just said there is totally flipping the truth.
That's right.
He's saying something that is not going to happen, and even as he paints it, it doesn't really make sense, because federal money, when you're talking about billions and billions, there are not federal cuts. There's going to be spending more money in these states on this healthcare. It's a bizarre way of analyzing this stuff, but he can get you to believe it, which is what he does in Texas.
And by the way, I just want everyone to take a quick second to put all the pieces together, because this is not an isolated story. You should take it into context, or consider it in context, and consider what lawmakers just voted in favor of, which is increasing defense funding to the tune of $700 billion, okay? $700 billion, even though just last December, the Washington Post reported that the Pentagon hit a study indicating that they had wasted $125 billion a year on wasteful bureaucracy within the Pentagon, okay? So on one hand, they're wasting $125 billion. Fast forward to today, and lawmakers voted in favor of increasing the defense budget, which is ridiculous. And then at the same time, we have Republicans talking about how, no, we should do away with the Medicaid expansion.
Right.
I mean, it's so incredibly frustrating. Okay, so there's Ted Cruz. Senator John Kennedy also said some pretty interesting things, because while Republicans claim that they're in favor of states' rights, which is why they're giving these block grants to the states so they can handle the money however they want, apparently there are some restrictions that they're considering.
And keep in mind, before Anna reads it, the John Kennedy is from Louisiana. He is the colleague of Senator Cassidy, so he should know this stuff pretty cold.
He should know it, right? So here's what Senator John Kennedy had to say about what rights the states would have in regard to these block grants. I want to get us to give guardrails to the states to say, you cannot use these monies to set up a state-run single-payer system. I don't believe in it. I think it's a mistake. And then Lauren Gambino from The Guardian said, do you think that kind of goes against the idea of states' rights and being able to use this money as the states want to? Kennedy says, no, we have plenty of federal rules that apply to every state, but we still agree with states' rights. What? So it's not about states' rights. It's about limiting, any type of federal funding that helps Americans afford the private insurance. That's what it's about.
It's about getting rid of Obamacare.
It's about getting rid of Obamacare.
It's not about it. That's the bottom line. I mean, it's not subtle. It's not. They're not beating around. They're trying to beat around the bush. That's all that is motivated. These are people that ran in 2016, said we're going to do it. We're going to repeal and replace. We're going to repeal and replace. We're going to repeal and replace. So far, they haven't been able to do it. This is their last great hope of doing it, going back to their states and saying, we did this. John Kennedy That is a foolish statement because of what you just said. It's about, I mean, to say that we're going to give it states' rights, but it's federal rules that are going to apply to states' rights. That's not the same as states' rights. That's federal.
That's right.
Ridiculous.
And then finally, Jeff Stein from Vox also got the chance to ask Senator Kennedy a few questions, and I want to share that exchange briefly. Stein asks him, what are the main policy explanations for getting behind this bill? What does this bill do right policy-wise? Simple question. Kennedy says, I think it's an improvement over Obamacare. Okay, why? Kennedy responds, my position has always been that number one, I think Obamacare has been a failure. Number two, first chance I get to vote for repeal, to repeal it, I'll do it. And number three, if it's a replacement, if replacement is better than Obamacare, I will vote for it. Just a bunch of non-answers. I don't like Obamacare, I want to repeal it. I can't tell you what I like about this new proposal, but I don't like Obamacare, so I'll vote for anything else, even if it means that my constituents, that innocent Americans who rely on this coverage are gonna lose that coverage. It's pathetic. So that's what's going on with the Senate. I highly doubt that any of them have even really read the legislation or know what's in it.
John Kennedy doesn't know a goddamn thing that's in this bill, not a thing. He just knows that it's not Obamacare, which is the crux of what I was saying before. He doesn't even know Bill Cassidy. Bill Cassidy is his co-senator. He's his constituent, if you want to put it that way. He doesn't even know what Bill Cassidy put in this bill. He's among the worst John Kennedys to ever serve in the Senate, I'm going to say.
Help us build independent media. Become a member of the Young Turks. TYTnetwork.com/join.